Son. When writing conversational English for advanced text-to-speech systems, the script must break away from the rigid structure of written prose. Real humans do not speak in perfectly formed, complete paragraphs. To achieve true naturalness, the script should incorporate the following conventions. 1. Disfluencies and fillers. Use words like, well, so generously. These are not signs of poor speech. They are cognitive pauses where the speaker is actively thinking. Example, well, it's kind of like trying to find a needle in a haystack, too. False starts and self-corrections. People often start a sentence, change their mind, and restart. Use em dashes to indicate these abrupt shifts instead of ellipses. Example, the researchers found that, well, actually, they didn't even expect to find it in the first place. 3. Active backchanneling and interjections. When one person is explaining something, the other person doesn't stay completely silent. They offer brief verbal affirmations or reactions to show they are listening. Example exchange. Host speaker. So they set up the experiment in the lab.
Yeah,
Expert speaker.
right.
Host speaker. And almost immediately they notice this weird anomaly. Expert speaker. Oh, wow, really? Host speaker. Yeah, it was completely unexpected. 4. Short turns. Avoid long monologues. Break up complex explanations by having the listener ask a clarifying question or summarize what was just said. No speaker should go on for more than 3 or 4 sentences without the other chiming in. 5. Colloquial phrasing. Use casual transitions and idioms rather than formal academic language. Let's unpack this, or that is wild, sound much more natural than let us analyze this phenomenon, or that is highly remarkable. 6. Overlapping thoughts. Sometimes the speaker finishes the other's thought or jumps in right as they are wrapping up. Example, exchange, expert speaker. It creates this boundary line that is host speaker, perfectly balanced. Expert speaker, exactly, perfectly balanced between the 2 points. Expert speaker, natural notes.
Welcome to today's deep dive. If you're listening to this right now, I want you to just take a quick look around your home or, maybe your office desk if you're at work.
Yeah, there is a very, very good chance that you own one of these. Or at least you've seen one recently.
Right. Exactly. I'm talking about the Chinese money plant.
Mm.
They're those incredibly popular house plants they have these perfectly round, flat, bright green leaves.
They almost look like little lily pads just hovering on stems.
Yes, lily pads. That is the perfect description. And people give them as housewarming gifts
Yeah.
all the time. But we are looking at this brand new article. It was published by Science Daily on May 14th, 2026.
Right, and it's detailing some really fascinating research out of the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory.
Yeah. And it turns out that unassuming little plant that's probably sitting next to your coffee mug right now, it is secretly functioning like a city planner or even like a computer scientist.
It's wild to think about. The researchers have basically uncovered that the Chinese money plant is growing and organizing its leaves using this highly elegant spatial math.
Which is just, it's mind-blowing.
It really is. It's the exact kind of math that human engineers use to solve, complex distance and logistics problems.
So the mission for our deep dive today is to really figure out how nature manages to do this. We want to understand how a biological organism uses this mathematical perfection to survive.
Right, and to do it without ever actually measuring a single thing.
Exactly. Because, we are so used to our brains kind of tricking us into seeing patterns where there aren't any, right? So when scientists first noticed the geometry of this plant, the immediate assumption could have easily been that it was just an illusion.
Oh, for sure. We project order onto things constantly.
Right. So to really grasp the math happening inside the plant, we first have to talk about how the human brain usually looks for patterns in the world and how it actually gets it wrong most of the time. We have to talk about this concept called apophenia.
Yeah, apophenia. It's really a fundamental part of the human cognitive experience. Our brains are just relentlessly wired to find order, even when we're looking at pure randomness.
Think about the classic example, right? You're lying on the grass on a nice summer afternoon, and you're just looking up at the clouds drifting by.
That's universal experience, yeah.
Right. And the clouds themselves are just random. They're these chaotic puffs of water vapor being shaped by atmospheric wind currents. There's no inherent design to them at all.
None whatsoever.
But your brain completely refuses to accept that visual chaos. You look up and you imagine a sailboat. Or, maybe you see a seahorse.
Or, as the Science Daily article jokingly points out, maybe you look at a cloud and you just see the face of your great-aunt Rosemary staring back at you.
Yes. Great Aunt Rosemary in the clouds. We are entirely wired as a species to see meaningful patterns in random noise. We desperately want to impose order on things that just have no order.
What's fascinating here is the sheer contrast between that human psychological quirk and actual biological reality. Because apophenia is just our imagination working overtime.
It's a neurological illusion.
Exactly. But Associate Professor Sekit Navlaka at the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, he studies something entirely different. He studies hidden structures in nature that are absolutely not illusions.
They're the real deal.
They really are. The structures his lab focuses on are mathematically perfect, and they are incredibly real.
Which brings us right back to the star of today's deep dive. So the scientific name is Pilea peperomioides.
Yeah, but known universally as the Chinese money plant.
Right. It's a perennial species, which just means it survives and regrows year after year, and it's originally native to the Yunnan and Sichuan provinces in China.
Right, and over the last few decades, it has just exploded in popularity around the world as a decorative houseplant. You see them everywhere.
You really do.
Yeah.
But Navlaka and his research team decided to look past its familiar, cute exterior. They wanted to examine the actual microscopic architecture of those round, circular leaves.
Which is where things get really interesting.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if the plant isn't just making random, chaotic shapes that our brains are, misinterpreting as order, what exact mathematical pattern is it actually using?
Well, the source material specifically names a framework. It says the plant naturally forms a Voronoi diagram.
A Voronoi diagram. Now, I consider myself a fairly curious person, but Voronoi diagrams definitely weren't on the syllabus in my high school geometry class.
Yeah, they usually aren't.
What is the fundamental concept behind that? Like, how does it work?
So it's a foundational concept in several highly technical fields, but the premise is actually quite intuitive. At its core, a Voronoi diagram is a geometric system that divides a continuous space into separate, distinct regions.
Okay.
And the crucial part is that it divides that space based entirely on the distance to specific central anchor points.
Okay, I want to bring in this brilliant analogy from the article because it really grounds the concept for me. Think about school districts in a city.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. So imagine you're looking at a map of a brand new town. The city planners have just built 5 new schools, and they're scattered randomly across the town's geography. Now, they face this logistical hurdle. They need to draw the boundary lines for the school districts. They have to figure out which residential houses send their kids to which specific school.
Right, and the most logical, efficient way to design those districts is to minimize the commute for every single student. You basically base the borders on pure distance.
Exactly. So the planners draw the district boundary lines in such a way that every single house inside a specific district is always geographically closest to the school assigned to them.
Right, rather than being closer to any of the other 4 schools.
Yes. And if you map those boundaries perfectly across the entire town, ensuring no one is ever traveling further than they absolutely need to, you have just created a Voronoi diagram. Every distinct region is defined entirely by its closest central point.
And this mathematical puzzle has massive real-world applications. As Navlaka points out in the research, human societies have relied on Voronoi diagrams for centuries.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, I mean, we use them in modern city planning to figure out the optimal placement for hospitals or fire stations.
That makes total sense. To make sure emergency services can reach any neighborhood in the absolute minimum amount of time.
Exactly. And telecommunications companies use them in network design, too. They strategically place cell phone towers to guarantee that a user standing anywhere in a city gets the strongest possible signal.
Based purely on their proximity to the nearest tower.
Right. It's just a highly optimized, highly efficient way to allocate limited space and resources based on the mathematics of distance.
Okay, that paints a very clear picture of a complex mathematical framework. But human engineers are doing that. And now we are applying this to a houseplant.
Right. Little green leaf.
Yeah. I want to try to visualize this for you, the listener, because the source material provides these 2 side-by-side images from the laboratory that are just, they're visually stunning. They look less like biology and more like, modern stained glass art.
The visual evidence they gathered is incredibly striking. It takes the abstract math and makes it so tangible.
So on the left side of the image provided by the Navlaka lab, you see the actual physical leaf of the Chinese money plant. It's a round, flat leaf, but they've illuminated it using this special technique.
Yeah, so it glows in this deep, really beautiful, translucent blue tone.
Yes, exactly. And when you look closely at the surface of this glowing blue leaf, you see these tiny, very noticeable pores scattered all across it. The scientists call these pores hydothodes.
Hydothodes, right.
And in the illuminated image, these hydothodes look almost like tiny glowing stars set against the dark blue background of the leaf.
And those pores, those hydothodes, are the critical anchors of the entire system. In our analogy, they are the schools. They're the central points.
Right, and connecting all the space around those star-like pores are these intricate looping vein networks. The scientific term used in the article is reticulate veins.
Which basically just means they form a web or a net-like structure.
Yeah, rather than just branching out openly like the limbs of a tree, right? These closed looping veins are what the plant relies on to move water and nutrients all throughout the broad, flat surface of the leaf.
That's the biological reality captured on the left side of the image.
But then on the right side, there's a second image. It's the exact same leaf, but the researchers have mapped a computer model directly over the top of it.
And the overlay is where the underlying geometry suddenly becomes undeniably visible. It just pops.
It really does. The computer model traces the enclosed regions around each of those tiny hydothode pores, and it highlights those regions using incredibly vibrant, distinct colors.
Right. There's a bright red section, a dark green section.
A vivid yellow section, bright blues, deep purples. I mean, it literally looks like a mosaic.
Yeah.
And every single colored piece of that mosaic perfectly surrounds one of those star-like pores.
With the physical veins acting as the borders between the colors.
Exactly.
What you are describing is the exact culmination of the research. Navlaka and his former graduate student, Chi Zheng, spent an immense amount of time on this.
I can imagine.
Yeah, they carefully mapped out the exact coordinates of where those tiny pores were located on the leaf and exactly how the looping reticulate veins naturally formed around them.
And then what happened when they analyzed it?
Well, when they fed that mapping data into their systems and actually ran the geometry, they realized that the leaf's biological structure wasn't arbitrary at all.
It was mathematical.
Perfectly mathematical. It was naturally forming a Voronoi diagram. The looping veins were acting as the boundary lines, the school district borders, essentially, and the hydothode pores were acting as the central schools.
Now, the article does point out something very specific here that feels important to clarify, because it mentions that you can occasionally see patterns that resemble Voronoi diagrams out in nature.
Right, yeah.
A classic example they offer is the markings on a giraffe,
Yeah.
because the dark spots on a giraffe's coat definitely look like those separate, divided geometric regions.
They do, but there is a profound structural difference that makes the Chinese money plant's architecture so rare and so significant.
Okay, what's the difference?
When you look at the coat of a giraffe, you clearly see the boundary lines. You see the distinct borders of the spots separating the regions. But those spots do not contain the obvious, visible central points that you find in a textbook mathematical example of a Voronoi diagram.
Ah, I see. The central anchor is missing from the visual equation entirely. So, relying on our earlier analogy, the giraffe coat basically has the school districts clearly drawn out, but it doesn't actually have the schools themselves. The math is implied, but the physical center isn't there.
Precisely. Navlaka and Zhang identified that the Chinese money plant is an exceptional outlier in biology because it possesses both elements.
It has the whole package.
It really does. It has the clear, distinct central points in the form of the hydothode pores, and it has the mathematically accurate boundary regions formed by the physical veins.
Wow.
It is a complete, uncompromised physical manifestation of a highly complex geometric diagram occurring entirely naturally inside the tissue of a leaf.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because I find myself really struggling with the terminology the researchers use to describe how this actually happens.
The algorithm.
Yes. The scientists in the article call this process a natural algorithm, and they partnered with Prozisio Przinkiewicz, an internationally recognized scientist whose specific expertise is in plant vein formation, to help decode this.
Right. He's a major figure in that field.
And the consensus among them is that the plant is actively running an algorithm to create these perfectly placed looping veins around the pores. But algorithm feels like a very heavily loaded word to me.
I can definitely see why you'd say that.
Right. Because plants lack a central nervous system. They do not have brains. They certainly do not have tape measures or drafting tables to calculate the exact geometric midpoint between two pores.
No, definitely not.
So how can a simple leaf possibly execute an algorithm? Isn't an algorithm inherently a top-down conscious process that a human computer programmer designs?
It is entirely understandable why the term feels counterintuitive in a biological context. I mean, our modern association with the word algorithm almost always involves a human programmer.
Yeah, someone typing explicit code into a machine.
Exactly, delivering a rigid set of step-by-step instructions. We think of it as a conscious entity directing a mechanical process from the top down. Measure this distance, calculate the halfway point, draw a line right here.
But if the plant isn't consciously measuring anything, the use of the word algorithm must mean something more foundational, right?
It does. In its purest, most fundamental definition, an algorithm is simply a reliable set of rules used to solve a problem. And nature possesses its own rigorous set of rules, completely driven by physics, chemistry, and local biology.
Okay, that makes it a bit clearer.
Yeah. T.C. Zhang, the former graduate student on this project, who is now a postdoctoral researcher at the Allen Institute, she explains this mechanism beautifully in the source text.
What does she say?
She points out that just as human societies have to solve complex logistical problems to survive, biological organisms face identical logistical hurdles.
Logistical hurdles like routing water pipes to houses in a city.
Precisely. The Chinese money plant has a very real survival problem. It possesses a large, flat leaf, and it must distribute water and chemical nutrients efficiently to every single microscopic cell.
And it has to do that without wasting precious metabolic energy building unnecessary redundant veins.
Exactly. It needs to be optimal.
So the plant has to solve this major resource distribution crisis, but it has to do it blind. It can't look down at its own leaf, spot two pores, and just calculate the halfway point to draw a boundary vein.
Right. It doesn't have a bird's eye view.
If it is entirely incapable of measuring distance, it must be relying on something much more immediate. Like it has to be reacting to its immediate surroundings.
That is the exact mechanism at play. Zhang notes that the plant relies entirely on what she calls local biological interactions to achieve the perfect Voronoi solution.
Local biological interactions, okay.
Yeah, it is a completely bottom-up process. It is entirely devoid of top-down measurement or conscious planning.
Let's really break down local biological interactions for the listener,
Really?
because that seems to be the absolute secret to how the math actually works in the wild.
Mm.
What does a local biological interaction actually look like at the cellular level as this leaf is growing?
Okay, so imagine the microscopic cells inside the leaf tissue during the early stages of development. The central pores, the hydathodes are established.
Okay, the schools are built.
Right. And as the leaf grows, there are active chemical signals, growth hormones, and literal physical cellular pressures pushing outward from each of those central pores.
Oh, like radiating outward like ripples in a pond.
That is a perfect way to picture it.
So you have these expanding waves of physical and chemical pressure growing outward from every single pore simultaneously. And eventually, the expanding wave from pore A is going to physically crash into the expanding wave from pore B.
And that collision is the key.
Really?
Yes. As these forces expand outward from two neighboring pores, they inevitably meet. And where those opposing growth pressures and chemical gradients intersect, the physical interaction of those local biological forces causes something to happen.
What happens?
The unspecialized leaf tissue right at that specific intersection is forced to differentiate. It hardens into a structural vein.
Oh, wow. That makes perfect sense. The vein isn't being drawn on a map ahead of time. The vein is essentially the physical, prominent scar left behind when two expanding forces crash into each other exactly halfway between their origin points.
Yep.
It's like imagine a crowd of people standing in a really large room, and they need to perfectly divide themselves into equal groups. But no one is allowed to give orders, and no one is allowed to count heads.
Right. How do they do it?
They can just start pushing their arms out, right? The moment the pressure from one group pushing outward perfectly equalizes against the pressure of another group pushing back, the boundary line naturally forms.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. The plant is completely ignorant of the overall geometric design. It isn't measuring distance at all. The strict physical and chemical constraints of the leaf's cellular growth are literally doing the math automatically.
That is incredible.
The algorithm is hard-coded into the basic biology of the individual cells. Each cell merely follows its local chemical instructions, basically. Push outward until you meet resistance.
And the macro result across the entire flat surface of the leaf is a highly organized, geometrically flawless map.
It is the ultimate example of self-organization.
So what does this all mean? We've established that the Chinese money plant utilizes this elegant.
Yes. Przemysl Przynkiewicz, the expert in plant vein formation who collaborated on this study, His documented reaction in the article really emphasizes the weight of this finding.
What was his reaction?
He discusses how remarkable it is that yet another aspect of plant form and patterning has turned out to be deeply mathematical. But more importantly, he states explicitly that for decades, the fundamental question of exactly how reticulate veins actually form has remained an open mystery in biology.
Wait, you mean those looping, enclosed, net-like veins we've been examining?
Exactly. Biologists simply didn't know how they managed to form in leaves.
That is staggering.
Mhm.
Up until this specific study from Novlaka's lab, the scientific community didn't actually understand how leaves constructed those complicated looping patterns.
Yep.
We could see them everywhere. They're on the plants in our living rooms. But we didn't understand the developmental mechanism behind them.
We could observe the final product, sure, but we could not explain the underlying logical rules driving their specific formations. But this Voronoi discovery provides the crucial breakthrough. Prsenkiewicz points out that by identifying this precise mathematical pattern occurring naturally in the Chinese money plant, researchers finally have a highly plausible, mathematically sound answer.
To a question that has been open for decades.
Right. The long-standing biological mystery of looping veins finally has a concrete mathematical solution.
To take a question that has been sitting unresolved in the literature for that long, and to suddenly provide a clean, observable mathematical model for it, that has to be an incredibly validating moment for the researchers involved.
It is a major, major contribution to the field, and it beautifully highlights a broader point that Navlaka makes in the source material.
Oh, what point is that?
He notes that this specific discovery represents a seamless merger of three distinct academic disciplines, disciplines that are traditionally treated as completely separate fields of study.
Okay, let me guess. Biology is obviously one.
Right, modern plant biology, which focuses on the chaotic, messy reality of living, growing tissue, but then you also have classical geometry.
Ah, the pure, abstract mathematics of shapes, spaces, and distances.
Exactly. And the third is computer science, which is dedicated to the study of algorithms, network optimization, and logical rule sets.
That is so cool. It essentially proves that those boundaries we draw between academic fields are entirely artificial when it comes to nature. The plant doesn't know it is crossing over from biology into computer science.
It doesn't care. It proves definitively that living organisms possess the innate capacity to generate highly organized, extraordinarily complex systems without requiring any conscious planning, foresight, or external measurement.
The math is just a natural byproduct of survival.
Exactly, it's built right in.
It genuinely changes how you look at the natural world around you. I mean, we started this deep dive by talking about the concept of epiphenia. We discussed how humans are so desperate for order that we look up at the clouds and hallucinate faces, imagining structural patterns that aren't actually there.
Right, the face of Great Aunt Rosemary.
Exactly. But what we've uncovered today is that sometimes we don't need to imagine the patterns at all. We just need to know how to look closely enough to see the ones that are real.
Exactly.
We started our journey by imagining faces in the clouds, and we ended up discovering that the very real physical houseplant sitting right now on your desk is silently running complex computer science algorithms.
Yeah, it really is.
It is utilizing centuries-old geometric principles to build perfect logistical networks, all just to ensure its leaves stay green.
It is a profound realization about the hidden architecture of the world. And Navlaka and Zhang explicitly note in the article that they hope future studies of these biological patterns will reveal even more.
More about how plants solve problems.
Exactly, about how they manage to solve incredibly complicated survival challenges. They view this research not as an endpoint, but as a stepping stone.
Yeah, exciting.
Yeah, they believe this Voronoi discovery will help us understand the broader foundational mathematical principles that silently shape evolution, the rules that govern biological development, and that ultimately shape life itself.
Which is just a staggering concept to sit with. The idea that the fundamental, messy rules of life and survival might just be elegant, pure geometry playing out in slow motion over millions of years of evolution.
It raises a deeply important question, and it is a thought I want to leave you with as we wrap up today's discussion.
Cool, please do.
It builds directly on the researchers' hope this discovery helps us decode the deeper principles of life. Think about this. If an ordinary plant, a plant that is casually given as a simple, everyday housewarming gift, is quietly executing highly elegant spatial math just to move a little bit of water around its leaves,
Yeah.
what other invisible mathematical algorithms are silently governing the chaotic-looking nature right outside your window?
Oh, wow. What an incredible thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.